Alter Bridge, Walk the Sky. This will be the 6th studio album from this band, full length, and is the follow-up to Last Hero from about a couple years ago. I don't remember, I might have, but I don't remember if I did talk about Last Hero or not. Possible I might not have started reviewing at the time, or I just didn't feel I could figure out how to pull off a proper review at the time. I'm not entirely sure if I did. I kind of blanked on, I'll admit. But anyway, this one, the last one, was a much darker and definitely more politically charged, given the time frame of which it had come out, kind of following things like more so the election of 2016. Yeah, that would be right, because we're going to have our election coming up next year in 2020. For the first time, the band decides to start this album off and has what honestly technically can be considered an intro track, because it's so short, and that's One Life. And it does come off kind of, which this one, I feel as though they've been deciding to use Fortress as a template and to bounce off of within these past couple records. With their last one, they were more dark and more political. This one, it seems they want to go a little bit more, a little lighter in touch, a more atmospheric type of, more airier, atmospheric sort of feel, hence Walk the Sky. And they've also been willing to want to try to kind of experiment a little more, or it seems they are willing to mess around with keyboards, I guess. Not that they haven't shown that they could do so via the way that they did the first portion of wow, why am I blanking on the first track from AB3? I shouldn't, because I actually really like that one. I hate when I do that. I'm so sorry, guys. Anyways, but it's very similar to that, and then Slip to the Void. Thank God. Now in my head. Anyway, sorry. But of course, following this, then we get, of course, the lead single that we were introduced to for this album, Wouldn't You Rather? Honestly, I like the song, but its message on trying to, stay true to yourself and not conform to what everyone else does, which seems to be a mantra this band does seem to actually utilize a lot more. Well, at least or at least has learned, or at least 3/4 of this band has learned from that mistake from Creed, and have still stuck with that mantra. Wouldn't you rather live from the heart? When nothing else matters. I'm not even going to finish the rest of that one without But anyways, that was one of them, and I believe they tried with Pay No Mind. Then I believe Take the Crown, and then Dying Light were the only other 3 singles that they used to tease this album with. Dying Light being the closer. And in all honesty, it does work as a closer, especially the way they choose to end the song with it. But though Tear Us Apart, you would think, is one of the brighter moments that are like this one. I feel they even went even more further into writing this fine line between the sound that they have been doing since their Blackbird AB3 stuff, while simultaneously trying to, or at least doubling down a lot more than what they were doing on Fortress in terms of what they used to sound like, what their sound started out as with One Day Remains. And it seems they kind of bring back, or at least some of that kind of tone in places, a lot more. Not that they don't still do, in fact, a lot of stuff that's kind of happens here is very much, even far more reminiscent. They decided to do another track. Very though not as good as a certain particular track involving where Mark actually takes up lead vocals, and it does come off slightly Tremonti-esque, but still kind of primarily at its core Alter Bridge. In which Waters Rising was an example of that when it came to Fortress, and here we have the track Forever Falling. It works, and I feel like it just kind of leaves off a little bit from what he had essentially left off from what he had worked on with Tremonti through A Dying Machine. In a way, at least some of the pacing ways of how he handles the lyricism, I guess. And it's not like the lead vocals don't, where Miles pops in and his vocals take over a little bit more. Which, that was another thing different with the way Fortress was in production, or at least the way it was mastered, I guess, because it's forever since the only other person involved besides the members we've come to know since the beginning, ever since Blackbird, has been Michael Levis Bisquet, and he has stuck around producing for this band, and I believe by the time of, at the very least, post AB3, more so Fortress, he has been also mixing for the band. But he did do a lot of that already for Mark's group Tremonti, and some of what he did, what was done there, has started to bleed in. Like, basically, a lot of what Miles Kennedy has done with Slash, and what Mark has done with his solo project, has sort of bleeded in together, while simultaneously bringing in elements of what that's what I loved about Fortress, and why I consider it one of my favorites from them. As a whole album experience, at least as a whole album experience. I can sort of pick and choose with those tracks. Here you kind of do as well. You kind of get that, and I think that's another issue, is you got to pick and choose with these. Like a little picky choosy here and there. I'm in the deep, or at least there's a lot more spiritual lyrics the way it comes across. Some things, Indoctrination seems to be more about the idea of this certain person that seems to be of this higher authority, with whether of a religious sort, that seems to use that power in a manipulative way to this other person, and it's, or at least getting into that mindset, and you do have your moments like Clear Horizon or Walkers. Tear Us Apart is more of meant to be anthemic. It's one of those more softerish tracks that is meant to be sort of anthemic to kind of, as the line, don't let the world tear us apart. Oh wow. Tear Us Apart. Don't live a lie, don't break a heart, don't compromise, just wait. Dying Lights, definitely one of the more uplifting ways of, and probably surprisingly, surprising for Miles Kennedy, especially having to come off of what he did on his solo release, which was definitely dark and kind of shows why he's an atheist, although it seems he's kind of starting to show some sense of, or at least some sense of Christian principles, or at least the Judeo-Christian principles we've all been instilled here within the States, at the very least, to an extent, or did for a while up until what happened 9/11, and some Islamic kind of started to seep in, I guess, in places. But it's primarily been Judeo-Christian principles around this country, in terms of its governing body and all that stuff. But anyway, sorry if I'm seeming too political on that one. It's just how last album was. But anyway, yeah, that's I think one of my favorites on this is at least in terms of like the riff, and they do have some nice riffage, but nothing completely stands out except for Native Son. For the most part, like some riffs are fine, and I can understand if some people find it for some reason for what Ultra Bridge standards are in terms of filler. But compared to most bands, especially when you're putting it up against Nickelback, obviously, but they, even for their filler, they still find a way to where make it work and it still be solid. And again, we have a solid release. At the moment, I don't know if I can for sure say I like this better than Last Hero. I don't think I like this more than Fortress, or get that full-on feeling necessarily of what I've gotten from those first 4 albums from Ultra Bridge. Yeah, I'm saying I kind of might still go back to those probably more than I have their later stuff, but they're still solid nonetheless. And this is another obviously solid, still pretty darn good album. If you're an Ultra Bridge, and as an Ultra Bridge fan, I'm still, at least to an extent, satisfied to know that they haven't completely rested on laurels. They've tried to do some things different. They're probably the one band I can say that probably deserves, ever since AB3 at least, deserves the term progressive post-grunge. And yeah, and definitely far more, or at least in the sense of, that sort of prog metal tinged post-grunge. I can't say progressive alt metal necessarily. They're not exactly, Tool or anything, but in that regard. And it's not like they didn't show hints of, Tool's potential influence on them in AB3, and I wouldn't necessarily say that they relied full on that. And it's not like they didn't get at moments Genty, especially Genty in places, or at least that kind of form of odd time signature in progressive metal that Meshuggah is known for. More so or less, but and some of the or even to the extent of what Gojira would wind up doing a better job of it with, or something. And and there's definitely that kind of progressive sort of metal tinge thing to Native Son in terms of the riffage, and anyway, especially most likely around the intro riff, but in a way that's almost Opethy ish, or at least the parts that work in terms of groove. If we're going, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's Blackwater Park or anything, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's, which I don't even think, and I'm probably gonna get shot in the comments for trying to compare Ultra Bridge to Opeth, just from Opeth fans, let alone Ultra Bridge fans. It's gonna be crazy. But anyway, though hell, at this point, me complimenting them on a possibly band that maybe even Mark appreciates. Who knows? I'll find out. Who knows? Who knows? But anyway, I've totally enjoyed this. I did enjoy this album. I'll come back to it, though. It's not like there is some other releases that somehow, distracted me from this and other things in my life that have, and why this review's pulled up as late as it is. But overall, as far as I'm concerned, if over time, I don't know if I would consider it album of the year necessarily. I might put it up pretty high, I guess. But I mean, the thing is that Ultra Bridge, though another solid release, it's just been a fairly good year in even, especially in terms of rock and even, dare I say, metal. And Ultra Bridge might wind up with this album being put to the wayside because of how good this year is, and where just having a solid album at the very least might not exactly be good enough to make it at the tippy top for sure. That's for sure. But to say that with what little I've been able to talk about and with releases and stuff, it's a possibility that at the very least it can make the top 10, or at least the top 15, if not the top 10, of my list. So there's that for sure. I can confirm. Sorry, Go for this record. But anyways, overall I did enjoy this. And yeah, Dying Light isn't bad, though I could see Tear Us Apart still working as a good closer, for what it is. But yeah, You can see some of these songs do coming across as sort of, even by the point of, even by the point of Forever Falling, but more so afterwards within Clear Horizon, Walking the Sky, and even to some extent of Tear Us Apart. That's where they do experiment a little bit with the keys a little bit, and some of it does get airy, atmospheric in places, even with of course Clear Horizon and One Life. They definitely do that for sure. It's somewhat brighter in tone, this record. I wouldn't go as far as to say to the extent of One Day Remains, but I'd say or at least there is a sense that it has the more darker oomph that they've had. This one feels way more closer in rock territory than the metal territory that the last couple releases have been. Or at least tries to learn to ride that line, which those records did also do, but I wouldn't say that it hits in the way that Fortress does for me, or even to that extent AB3. It goes back and forth with me a little bit on those two, but I still also have a soft spot for those first two records anyway, and Basquiat plays a huge part in this, as he usually does for Alter Bridge, and many a Miles and Mark's own projects, producing and mixing. He's almost like, in a way, for Alter Bridge at least, a fifth band member, so to speak, for what he's done. And you can tell, because sometimes their live setups aren't as good as what comes out of studios sometimes, except for maybe what they were able to release from one of their best shows, I guess. And I think it was Wembley. I'm trying to remember the venue. But anyways, which I do have that live CD, which it's not bad, even though I was more at the time interested in getting the bonus stuff because, it didn't exactly have all of it from the many a times when Best Buy used to do CDs. So, and apparently I don't have that for this one. I don't even know if there is a bonus track. I gotta double check on that. But anyway, apparently, eventually, and there was a decent bonus track, actually, for Dying Machine, by the way. Check that out, too, if you haven't. But, anyways, as far as I'm concerned, this album, thumbs up to the horns. I'm not going to say it's masterclass. That's more saved for the AB3 and Fortress for me. And, but it's, yeah. It's pretty good. I enjoyed myself coming back to it, but there is some other more surprising releases that have come out, and others earlier that have already stuck with me a lot more than this record has necessarily, but it's done enough to say that if you're an Alter Bridge fan, you will be more than happy with this thing. They do enough to not go too far out of the way, but not to the extent where they rest on their laurels. They're still, to some degree, somewhat trying new things while still somewhat trenching into that familiar territory that they've done as a band, while also within some of what they've done through other projects. Just finally come together and brought that together. It still works. They're still, as far as I'm concerned, Alter Bridge has not done anything to tarnish their name, and hopefully they don't decide to start doing that anytime soon. Fingers crossed on that. So, what do you guys think of Walk the Sky? Did you like it? Did you love it? Were you meh? I don't think you'd hate it, that I know of, but leave a comment below, let me know. As always, guys, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rocking. I will see you in the next video, whatever that may be. Take care, y'all.